Chapter 9 deals with hormones. Of the hormones, there are two classes of hormones. Hormones are cell compounds that bind to associated receptors, altering the metabolism of the cell containing the hormone receptor complex. Of the two classes of hormones, there are paracrine hormones and there are telecrine hormones. The paracrine hormones usually are discussed in pharmacology as well as in physiology. These are secreted into the interstitial space. They have a very short half-life, and examples are the prostaglandins and the neurotransmitters. And again, they're discussed not in biochemistry coming up. They'll be discussed in physiology or pharmacology. What we're going to focus our attention on in this chapter, chapter 9, are the telecrine hormones. These are secreted into the bloodstream. They can have very long half-lives like glucagon and cortisol, for example, and they include the endocrine as well as the GI hormones. The endocrine hormones can also be subdivided into two classes, the water and the lipid-soluble hormones. In this table are characteristics of similarities and differences between the water-soluble and the lipid-soluble hormones. A major difference between the lipid and water-soluble hormones is the location of the receptor for the hormone. Water-soluble hormones, because by definition they cannot enter cells, because they're water-soluble, they cannot go through the plasma membrane. The receptor must be on the cell surface, must be on the plasma membrane. Whereas lipid-soluble hormones, the receptor is found inside the cell. And the class of receptor that all lipid-soluble hormones use, they're classified as zinc finger class of receptor. Zinc finger class of receptor. And I'll talk more about what that means, zinc finger class of receptor, a little bit later. Now, water-soluble hormones, because they cannot enter cells, once the hormone binds to the receptor on the plasma membrane, undergoes a cascade called signal transduction. And the signal will be transduced to a second messenger, which often involves protein kinases, which will be activated. Whereas lipid-soluble hormones do not use second messengers because the hormone can enter the cell and find its receptor. It doesn't need a second messenger because the hormone can work directly by turning on and turning off pathways. But lipid-soluble hormone will bind to its receptor and then go into the nucleus of a cell and bind to a piece of DNA called a hormone response element, HRE. And HRE discussed in chapter 5 in the biochemistry lecture notes. HRE is a sequence of DNA to which the hormone and the hormone receptor together will bind, which is part of a region of DNA also called the enhancer region, which enhances, by the definition, the word enhancer enhances expression of a particular gene, discussed in chapter 5. Water-soluble hormones, again, because they cannot enter cells, they bind to the receptor on the plasma membrane. They transduce the signal to a second messenger, which results in protein phosphorylation, which can take minutes to turn on. Examples of water-soluble hormones that use protein phosphorylation mechanism, hormones like epinephrine and glucagon. And remember, lipid-soluble hormones do not result in any type of protein phosphorylation because they work at the gene level. Some water-soluble hormones can work at the gene level. A great example of this is the hormone glucagon. Glucagon can work one of two ways. It can work either at the gene level, and if it works at the gene level, it turns on a specific transcription factor called CREB, which stands for cyclic AMP response element binding protein. But remember, glucagon can also work by activating second messengers to activate protein phosphorylation mechanisms, whereas lipid hormones can never work by protein phosphorylation. They all work at the gene level. Examples of proteins that are water-soluble hormones are insulin, glucagon, and catecholamines, whereas lipid-soluble hormones like the steroid hormones, like calcitriol. Calcitriol also is called 1,25-dihydroxy vitamin D3, also called 1,25-dihydroxycholecalciferol, also called calcitriol, different names for the same hormone. Other lipid-soluble hormones like thyroxines, T3 and T4, retinoic acid, vitamin A, they all work at the gene level. All lipid hormones work at the gene level. The water-soluble hormones most work by second messengers, and they work by protein phosphorylation, dephosphorylation mechanisms, but some of the water-soluble hormones can also work at the gene level. I just mentioned glucagon.